It's AM 650's The Law Show, a comprehensive look at everything you need to know about the law. Now, here's Sterling Fox.
Well, good morning, and welcome to The Law Show here on AM 650. Our guests are from Macmillan LLP, and it's a real pleasure to welcome both of our lawyers back to the show. Andrew Aguilar and Ryan Black are lawyers with Macmillan and have been previous guests on The Law Show. It's good to see both of you again.
Good to see you.
Thanks, it's fun to be back.
Well, and we're going to talk about being lawyers and the legal profession. So let's all start off with you two, your personal stories, and of course we'll talk a little bit about one of Canada's largest law firms, Macmillan LLP. So where do you want to start? Andrew? No, actually, Ryan, you've been in the game a little longer, 10 years, and Andrew, 6 years.
Yes.
So seasoned lawyers both,
That's
but we'll defer to age in this case, Ryan. Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you became a lawyer. What brought you to the law?
Sure. I mean, I like a lot of people, I didn't really go into university with a lot of plans to do much of anything other than, learn and have fun and that sort of thing. I cobbled together a business degree after a few years. I traveled to Mexico a bit and, kind of found my calling in. I ended up thinking, business makes a lot of sense to me.
Okay.
And the classes that I enjoyed the most in my business school were the law classes. And so as I neared trying to find a job, I went, well, maybe I don't want to go find a job just yet. Maybe I want to stay in school a little bit longer.
Postpone work for a few more years.
Postpone it a little
Get
longer.
another degree.
And let me try this law school thing. So I did. And ending up quite enjoying law school. Didn't really think I wanted to be a lawyer. I went and clerked for the tax court in Ottawa. I kind of thought maybe I'd work with government, maybe in tax or something, tax policy.
Okay.
And then just tried applying to some firms just to see how it would go, and really liked the people I met, and ended up coming up to, at the time we were Langmissioner, but now Macmillan. And ended up coming to Macmillan in Vancouver and just having a blast.
Now, were you fortunate enough to article with the firm that you're still employed by?
Yes. I was a summer student, articling student, associate, and now partner.
That's not always the case, is it?
No, I mean, it can be, sometimes there's a little bit of lateral movement, and actually it's quite frequent. There's about probably a 5-year hump when you've been a lawyer and you kind of maybe feel like it's time to try something else.
Right.
But I got over it and stuck around, and it's been quite positive for me.
Now, Andrew, 6 years into the game, you were one of those who articled for one firm and ended up working for another almost immediately after your articling days had finished.
I did. I actually had secured another job by the time my articling period was finished, because I knew I wasn't going to be coming back. I was one of, I guess, slightly unfortunate to come up through the articling game right in 2008.
Oh,
when
the financial world fell off a cliff.
Yeah,
and so did a lot of clients' ability to pay.
Yeah, the firm, it wasn't a growth time for the firm. We'll say that much. So, but the firm, I was actually quite lucky because people were quite understanding that, everyone was dealing with how to deal with this, this new financial reality.
Sure.
And people were really great at that time in helping each other out and helping, when I was going through, I knew I wasn't going to get hired back, but lawyers were great. I'd go into their office and they'd immediately pick up the phone and call all of their friends at the various other law firms to see if anyone else had room, to try to help each other out to get through that time. And I was lucky enough to have another lawyer who had a connection at Macmillan. And she got me a referral in there, and I went through the interview and had a position secured for. By the time I was called to the bar, I started at a new shop.
Nice, very nice. What brought you to the law in the first place? What caused you to go to law school? Maybe like Ryan, to defer life for a couple more years, or had you intentions of becoming a lawyer early on in the game?
I think I got intentions as I was going through school. I think first off, I enjoyed school, so I was looking to stay in that.
All right.
I started in a business degree, but I found my political science and philosophy classes probably a little bit more interesting than the hardcore business classes.
Right.
So I didn't think that
the
that was
opposite of Ryan,
yeah.
right?
I didn't think that business was necessarily the way I wanted to go, and I was thinking, what is a way I could perhaps incorporate some of these skills together. After about 2 years of business school, I thought, maybe let's give the law a shot, and I was able to actually go to a university where they had a business law major.
Okay.
So I was able to take some law courses throughout that, and then went straight into law school. And unlike Ryan, I guess as well, I just went straight from high school, got my undergrad degree, went to law school, and then started practice. And
Are there more mature students entering the legal profession these days? Is the competition, is there a bottleneck of young people like you coming out of high school, Andrew, going right into university, aiming for law school as quickly as you can get there? Is that a bottleneck these days?
Well, I think there's only a certain amount of people who can go into law school, but I was quite surprised when I got in that law is one of the areas where there really is just a total variety of different entrance points for people.
Okay.
There's a lot of people who had previous careers, who went through and got master's degrees or even PhDs in their chosen fields, and then decided that they were looking for a career choice where perhaps they could apply some of those skills as well, and they thought the law is great. I have a chemistry PhD, maybe I can get into the high tech health sector. Right. In the law, they go in to get a law degree after that, and they proceed their way through. So there were people who went straight through, but I'd almost think that they were kind of the exception rather than the norm.
Yeah, and it's amazing how varied the experiences of people before they get into law school are.
Right.
You're just as likely to be sitting next to a business student as you are to a sociology student, as to someone who, for a few years ran one of my classmates ran a butterfly farm in Sri Lanka or something like that for a while and decided that they want a law degree. I mean, because unlike say med school where everyone kind of has a science background and goes into med school, so you tend to find a little bit of a homogenous background. It's really not like that in law, and that's what makes lawyers kind of interesting and diverse people to me.
We'll talk about the firm because it is such a diverse firm in terms of the range of law that is practiced under the McMillan LLP brand. But specifically with you two, what area of the law are you most actively engaged in? With you, Ryan, first.
Yeah, so I'm definitely I guess not the courtroom lawyer, the paperwork lawyer. I'm a solicitor through and through. I do business deals. I frequently work on technology
your business background and your love of that area of commerce has really transferred into the legal profession nicely for you then.
And because law is a stressful and demanding field, having an area that you enjoy. I enjoyed business when I was in school. I enjoy it now. I enjoyed technology in school. I'm a giant geek at heart, and I get to be a geek at work because I work with technology clients. I mean, this is part of what makes being a lawyer enjoyable, is finding that area of law that you really enjoy and running with it. I would nerd out reading articles about intellectual property and technology issues if I wasn't being paid to do it. So it's nice to be at a place where I can do what I really enjoy.
Right. And Andrew, what area of legal activity are you busiest at?
Well, I am a barrister, so I do the courtroom stuff. It's generally always disputes that I'm dealing with, which is a much different perspective than Ryan, where you're making deals.
Right, exactly.
It's when things go wrong.
Almost other opposite sides of the same coin in that regard.
Yeah, and
right?
I think I am actually more of a generalist, which I think there's more room for that as a litigator. So I do all types of corporate commercial matters. I find tech issues to be quite interesting. So I've gotten quite a few files in that, and I've focused a bit on working on the internet law.
Well, you and I have talked about that,
we
privacy and the internet and so on. It's fascinating.
And I found it just great that the law really facilitated my ability to kind of explore my interests. But anytime, something that I find interesting, if I meet someone who's an interesting person and they have a problem, I can usually take that on. And that's one of the things that's really interesting about being a lawyer.
Tell us a little bit about McMillan, guys. It's a big company. It's a national company with even offices overseas. So flesh that description out for us a bit, Ryan.
Sure. So we are definitely a national firm with an international presence.
And you mentioned Lang Mitchener, which was the old name before McMillan.
Right. So McMillan existed and Lang Mitchener existed, and we merged in about 2011.
Okay.
We took on the name McMillan, and we've it's been actually a very positive thing. We've got a national presence from that. They had a Montreal and a Calgary office, which we didn't have before. We had an Ottawa and a Vancouver office, which they didn't have before.
Oh, okay.
So now we're in Toronto, Calgary, Montreal, Ottawa, Vancouver, and we have an office in Hong Kong as well to help Chinese clients with Canadian law issues. And we pretty much do every area of the law other than maybe family or criminal law, although that's not to say that some of our clients don't have criminal or family law issues that we have to look at from time to time.
How many lawyers do you share office space with here in Vancouver?
So I think there's about 80 lawyers in the Vancouver office currently.
All right.
And then there's, it's quite a few, we share quite a few floors because we've also got a lot of legal administrative assistants, paralegals, students.
And you're in the Royal Center, Georgia and Burrard, right?
Yeah,
we are.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, and there's about 300 people across the country, 300 lawyers across the country, and a couple in Hong Kong, and it's a pretty, it's a big organization, and it's full of people who are really passionate lawyers, which is a lot of fun.
And I guess one of the nice things that McMillan brought is they've tried to make it all kind of one firm as opposed to a bunch of individual centers. So it's quite regular that we're dealing with lawyers in Montreal or Toronto. Right. And, it's great whenever you have a question on some area that you can call someone who's an expert in that area. And
right.
That's all they do, or, they're one of the top people, and you can just pick their mind for 10 minutes or for half an hour.
Now, despite the fact that you have a national company and you have colleagues in other provinces, explain how the jurisdiction thing works. You're both called to the bar
Right.
in British Columbia. You
That's
have
right.
permission to
That's right.
practice law in BC.
That's right.
If, however, you're dealing with a client who has activities in other provinces,
Yeah.
Can you represent that client in court, Andrew, in another province, or do you have to get a colleague from Macmillan, say Calgary or Toronto, to take the case because you're not allowed to practice in Ontario?
Well, the law is actually quite good, and there's good transfer rules. So you are actually allowed to appear in court in other provinces.
Oh, I see.
There's a certain limit. You can only spend a certain number of days going to other provinces, and if you want to spend more time, you can get called in those other provinces simply by promising that you're going to read all of their bar materials.
Oh, so it's not the same song and dance it was back in BC in the first place.
That's right.
Yes.
Once you're called to the bar, it gets a little bit easier.
Oh,
that's
okay.
for sure.
Well, that makes the interprovincial business a little easier to deal with.
Yeah, and it's
too.
good. And it's easier in Canada because we have a few number of law schools, and they all produce lawyers at roughly the same level. You can really trust the level generally to be very high for Canadian lawyers. So I think that's why it's easier to go between the various jurisdictions, is they know that if they've gone through Canadian law school, that you've at least got that much of a lawyer and people who can handle a certain level.
And apart from Quebec, unlike, say, the United States, where there's 50 very different states with very different laws.
Oh, you bet.
The laws in Canada throughout the provinces, throughout the common law provinces, are very homogenous. Like consumer protection law in Ontario is very similar to what it is in BC. There are definitely differences that you'd want an Ontario lawyer's advice on.
Sure.
But they're similar enough that it makes some sense that in a lot of cases you might want to use your BC lawyer to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
I suppose one thing that must be really rewarding once one becomes a lawyer is the fact that the law is a living, breathing thing. Yeah. That law gets changed. You go to court, Andrew, and you do your best to change the law every chance you get. You don't always succeed, but you're there to try. And that's the beauty of the job, I would think, because there's always something new around the corner. In the case of the internet and technology, areas that both you guys spend a lot of time focusing on, my gosh, it's a matter of minutes until somebody comes up with something new that you have to write new law for.
And that's what's helpful about, the common law, which is when judges make decisions, that forms the law moving forward. And for an area like technology law, where there's so many new things that couldn't possibly have been contemplated when the original laws came into place, it's strange how quickly you argue something on behalf of your client, the judge makes a decision, and that becomes the law.
That's right, yeah.
In that area, and it moves it, and judges try not to depart too much, and it's incremental movements, but you can be at the forefront of some of these incremental movements or dealing with questions that there was just a big open space. Law, it's expensive to get into court and to argue things, and you're generally not going to do so if the law is very established and right off the bat who's going to win and who's going to lose. There's no sense in going forward. But it's where there's those issues that you end up in court and judges have to make decisions.
The cutting edge issues, particularly on the technology front, right?
Yeah.
And I would think, too, but that's very stimulating and a little risky because, if you're going into a new area in which everybody's kind of flying by the seat of their pants, who knows how it's going to come out?
Well, it certainly makes it difficult sometimes to advise clients, when you tell them, here's what we think the law would say, but no one's ever gone to court about this and we don't really know. So, here's a good practice. It can be tough sometimes, unlike the United States where they litigate everything, it seems.
Yes.
And so there's some court decision about pretty much every issue. Canadians are far less likely to end up, getting to the level of court where there's actually a decision that comes out. And so in the areas I deal in, for example, like if I have a video game client, I deal with intellectual property law.
Right.
The Copyright Act doesn't really refer to video games at all.
Right.
We think of them as literary works the same way that you would write a novel. We think, well, you write a computer program, so that must be like a video game. But is it more like a movie? There's a special area in the copyright law for cinematographic works.
Right.
Maybe a video game is now more like that. It's got producers and directors and artists and
sure.
actors. Maybe it's more like that now. So, I mean, it's this interesting area where, depending on what your situation is, you have to figure out how does this thing that was written in 1978 or whatever apply to today's reality. And it's a fascinating intellectual exercise.
So you're leaving me in suspense here. How did that one work out? What is a video game defined as in 2014?
I'm not sure. Truthfully, I would say it's probably the definition of cinematographic work allows for some wiggle room to say things like movies.
Yeah, it's more.
And I would say
of
that
a
there are
movie
definitely
than a novel, isn't it?
Probably some games. I mean, to me, there might be some games that don't have big crews on them. And it's just some guy sitting in his basement that programs something and draws a few blocks, and that's your game.
Yeah.
Other games, have elaborate $100 million budgets with a cast of thousands working on it. To me, that's maybe more akin to a movie than anything else.
Right.
Yeah.
But again, it remains to be. It's a work
right.
in progress.
I don't believe
literally.
that a court has said anything about it, but if someone wants to correct me on that, I'd love to know.
It would be helpful for a few clients, I'm sure.
It certainly
too.
would be.
But it's one of the nice things. You have to always be, I think, have some type of interest for new knowledge to be a lawyer, because you're constantly having to read and stay updated on how things are going. And,
Right.
All of these. It is things, for Ryan and for me, there's certain articles that you'd read anyway. So it's great that we're reading those, and those are helping us move forward. But, new issues that are constantly arising, the decision in the EU that Google has to let people have a right to forget.
Oh, right.
Something like that.
And all sorts of Facebook stuff going on right now, too, with privacy. And,
that's right.
And even getting removed is suddenly a real chore.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I think, what Andrew's saying is that, these things happen, and, even though we're in Canada and EU's decision doesn't affect us, very clearly that is going to have an impact on Canadian business. The fact that a court in the EU has said something means something to us.
Well, it's the global village, isn't it, Andrew? It's no longer, it's half a world away. Who cares what they think in the Netherlands or Sweden or Australia? Well, everybody cares, and everybody knows about it, generally within a matter of minutes when an important decision comes down.
Yeah, there's just a stunning amount of information that's coming out from all different areas, and it is becoming relevant to your practice at home. And it's nice that there are easier sources to find these types of things and stay updated so that you can discuss them intelligently as you need to.
The challenges of being a lawyer. Our guests, lawyers, both from Macmillan LLP in Vancouver, are Ryan Black and Andrew Aguilar. This is The Law Show on AM 650. It's a good one. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
This is AM 650's The Law Show. There's more of the show still ahead.